I need to read the skill file and check the uploaded names file before writing. The names to avoid are Claire, Dana, Priya, David, Ray, Gerald, Marcus, Kevin, Lee, Andrea, Nora, Brendan, Simone, Owen, Faye, Theo, Rosalind. Now let me write the story. The morning of my cousin's wedding, I ironed the same dress I'd worn to 3 funerals. It was navy blue, a little too loose in the shoulders now, and the hem had been restitched twice. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my studio apartment and told myself it looked fine. It didn't look fine. But it was what I had, and I was 29 years old and still buying groceries based on what was on sale that week, so fine was going to have to be enough. My name is Iris. I'm a home health aide. I work 42 hours a week caring for other people's parents, and I make enough to cover rent, utilities, and about $200 of food if I'm careful. I don't say this for sympathy. I say it because you need to understand where I was standing when everything I thought I knew about my own life got turned inside out in front of 47 people at the Riverside Banquet Hall on a Saturday afternoon in October. I almost didn't go to the wedding. My cousin, Tommy, was marrying a woman named Beth, and I liked Beth. She was warm and funny and had once slipped me a 20 at Christmas without making a big deal of it, and I wanted to be there for her. But Tommy was my stepfather's nephew, which meant going to this wedding meant being in the same room as my stepfather, Glenn. And being in the same room as Glenn meant pretending, for an entire afternoon, that he was a normal person who had never done anything wrong. I was good at pretending. I'd had a lot of practice. I took the bus to the venue because my car had a slow leak in the front left tire that I couldn't afford to fix yet. I sat in the second-to-last row of seats during the ceremony and watched Tommy cry when Beth walked down the aisle, and I cried a little too, quietly, in a way I hope nobody noticed. My mother found me at cocktail hour. She looked beautiful, the way she always did. She had on a green silk dress, and her hair was done professionally, and she was holding a glass of white wine. And when she saw me, she tilted her head to the side, the way she did when she was about to say something that was meant to sound kind. "You look tired," she said. "I worked a double yesterday. You should take better care of yourself." I nodded. I took a sip of water. Across the room, I could see Glenn laughing with someone, his hand on the other man's shoulder, completely at ease. He was good at parties. He was good at performing. Glenn had married my mother when I was 15. Before that, it had been just the two of us, my mother and me, in a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus. We weren't rich, but we were okay. Then Glenn came in, and within 2 years, my mother had a new house, new car, new clothes, and a daughter she seemed to look at a little differently. Like I was a leftover from a previous version of her life that she was still figuring out what to do with. I left for college at 18, Ohio State, on partial scholarship. I applied for every grant I could find and took out loans for the rest and worked 20 hours a week at a campus coffee shop. My mother and Glenn contributed nothing. When I asked about financial help my freshman year, Glenn said, with a very patient expression, that they believed in young people learning self-sufficiency. I believed in eating, so I kept working. I graduated in 5 years instead of 4 because I had to drop to part-time enrollment twice when money got tight. I had $34,000 in student loans when I finished. I moved to Cincinnati, got my health aid certification, and started paying them back at $280 a month. That was 4 years ago. I still had $27,000 left. I told myself the debt was just part of my life now. A fixed cost, like rent. The cocktail hour moved into the reception, and I found my seat at table 11, which was near the back and included 2 of Tommy's coworkers and an elderly great-aunt named Vera, who was hard of hearing and kept asking me to repeat myself. I didn't mind Vera. She asked me what I did for work, and when I told her, she patted my hand and said it was a noble thing, caring for people. And I thought, yes, it is, and I wish it paid like it was noble. The toasts happened. Dinner happened. I ate the chicken and drank 1 glass of wine and was starting to think about when I could politely leave to catch the last bus home, when I noticed something happening on the other side of the room. There was a woman standing near the entrance and she was looking at me. She was in her early 70s, I guessed. Silver hair, cut short, a deep burgundy dress. She was standing very still while everyone else moved around her, and she was looking directly at me with an expression I couldn't read from that distance. Not hostile, not warm, just certain, like she had come here specifically for something and she found it. I looked away. I looked back. She was still watching. I didn't know her. I was sure of that. Then she started walking toward me. My first instinct was to look for my mother. I don't know why. Some leftover reflex from childhood? Looking for backup. I spotted my mother across the room, and I saw the exact moment she noticed the woman walking in my direction. My mother's face did something I had never seen it do before. It went perfectly, completely still. Glenn saw her a second later. He put his drink down on the nearest table. He didn't pick it up again. The woman reached me and said, "You're Iris." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "I'm your grandmother," she said. "Your father's mother. My name is Carol." I had been told my father's family wanted nothing to do with me. I had been told this since I was 6 years old, when my father left, and my mother explained gently that his parents had never approved of her and, by extension, had never approved of me. I grew up understanding that on my father's side, I simply did not exist in any meaningful way. I stared at Carol for a moment. She had my father's eyes, I realized. Or I had her eyes. The same shade of gray-green that I'd always thought was unusual and had never seen on anyone else. "I've been trying to reach you for 2 years," she said. "Your mother's number goes to voicemail. Your contact information isn't listed anywhere I could find. Tommy finally agreed to tell me you might be here tonight." "I don't understand," I said. "I know." She sat down in the empty chair beside me, which had been unoccupied all evening. She folded her hands on the table. "I need to tell you something, and I want to tell you calmly, because I've waited a long time to say it, and I want to say it right." I nodded. "When you started college," she said, "I set up a direct payment to your university. Tuition, room and board, fees, the full cost. Every semester for 4 years. I arranged it through my attorney, and the payments were sent to an account designated for your education expenses." She paused. "I was told by your stepfather that you had received the funds, that you were doing well, that you preferred not to have direct contact with my side of the family." The noise of the reception continued around us. Someone laughed loudly near the bar. The DJ was setting up equipment near the dance floor, testing levels. "How much?" I said. My voice came out flat, which was not how I felt. $2,000 a month, she said. For 48 months. I did the math without meaning to. It was the kind of math that happens automatically, before you can stop it. 48 times 2,000. $96,000. $96,000. $96,000. I had $34,000 in student loans because I thought no one was helping me. I had worked 20 hours a week on top of a full course load. I had dropped to part-time twice. I had eaten rice and beans for weeks at a stretch and worn the same coat for 3 Ohio winters because the lining was still intact, even if the zipper stuck. "The account," I said. "Where did the money? That's what I need to tell you." Carol's voice was steady, but her jaw was tight. "My attorney has been investigating for the past 8 months. The account was opened in your name, but the address of record was your mother and stepfather's home address. The debit card was mailed there. All 4 years of statements were mailed there." I heard a sound. I thought at first it was from somewhere else in the room. Then I realized it had come from me. "They knew," I said. "They withdrew the funds consistently," she said. "Every month. The account was kept at a low balance. Nothing that would trigger a review. I'd been sitting with my hands in my lap, and I looked down at them now, and they were shaking, and I pressed them flat against my thighs to make them stop. $96,000. Gone. Every month for 4 years. Money that was supposed to be mine, meant for me, paying for my life. And instead it had gone into a different life entirely. My mother's new kitchen renovation. The lease on Glenn's second car. The vacation they took to Cabo the summer after my sophomore year when I was eating peanut butter out of the jar because I'd miscalculated my hours and come up short on grocery money. I thought about calling my mother and asking her, once, sophomore year, if there was any way they could send even a little help. She had said sorrowfully that things were tight. She had said Glenn's business had had a slow quarter. Things were tight. I became aware that my mother was approaching the table. She came from the left, moving quickly, with the focused energy of someone trying to get somewhere before something happens. She had her pleasant expression on, the one she used for managing situations in public. Glenn was a few steps behind her, and his pleasant expression was on too, but it wasn't sitting as comfortably on his face. "Mom." She reached the table. She addressed Carol, not me. "This isn't the place. I've said what I came to say," Carol said. To Iris. "This is a family event. Iris is family." Carol looked at my mother with an expression that was not heated. It was, if anything, quieter than the room around us. She was always family. I spent 2 years trying to confirm that she was receiving her education fund, and you screened my calls and sent me letters saying she wanted no contact. That was your choice. This conversation, she glanced at me, then back at my mother, was inevitable. Glenn stepped closer. He had his hands in his jacket pockets, and he was doing the thing he always did when he was nervous, rolling his shoulders slightly forward. "There are legal processes for these kinds of claims," he said. "If you have concerns about financial arrangements—" "My attorney has already filed," Carol said. "The civil complaint was submitted 10 days ago. I'm not here to argue. I'm here because I wanted Iris to hear this from me, not from a letter." Glenn stopped rolling his shoulders. My mother's pleasant expression had gone somewhere. I didn't know where it had gone, but it was no longer on her face. I stood up from the table. I wasn't sure when I had decided to do that. I was standing, and I was looking at my mother, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the old pull toward her, the need to smooth things over, to make myself smaller and more manageable, so she would look at me with something other than careful patience. "The coat," I said. She blinked. "What?" "My winter coat. Junior year. The zipper was broken and I duct taped it closed for 6 weeks before I could afford a new one." I heard my own voice like it was coming from somewhere measured and distant, not angry, just clear. "I called you and you said things were tight. You said Glenn had had a slow quarter." She said nothing. "I ate peanut butter for 2 weeks that October," I said. "I did the math wrong on my paychecks and I ran out. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to seem like I couldn't manage." I looked at her. "Where did you go that October?" "You and Glenn." Her lips pressed together. "You went to Cabo," I said. "You sent me a picture of the sunset from the resort. I still have it." People near us had gone quiet. Not everyone. The DJ was still testing bass levels on the other side of the room, and someone near the bar was telling a long story, but the people in our immediate orbit had registered that something was happening, and the social instinct to look had won over the polite instinct to pretend not to. Tommy appeared at the edge of my vision. Beth was beside him, her hand on his arm. I could see on his face that he had known something, maybe not everything, but something, and that he had made a judgment call in telling Carol where to find me tonight. And I filed that away to think about later. Glenn said, very quietly, "This is not the place." "You already said that," I told him. "Through her." Carol stood up beside me. She was shorter than I'd expected, maybe 5'2", but she stood like someone who had made every decision she was going to make about the situation long before she walked through the door tonight, and that certainty added something to her presence. "Iris," she said, "I have a car outside. You don't have to go anywhere tonight, and you don't have to make any decisions tonight. But if you want to leave, I would like to take you somewhere quiet and tell you everything. All of it. What the investigation found, what the attorney has filed, and what I would like to do to make this right if you'll let me." I looked at my mother one more time. She was looking at the table. Not at me. She was looking at the white tablecloth and the half-full wine glass and the small votive candle that had burned down to almost nothing, and she had the expression of someone calculating something, running numbers, the same way I had run numbers all those years with no idea why they never came out right. I picked up my purse from the back of my chair. I said goodbye to Vera, who patted my hand again, and said it had been a pleasure. I followed Carol through the reception hall, past the tables and the DJ setup and the photo booth with its feather boas and cardboard props, out through the glass doors and into the October night. The air was cold and smelled like leaves and car exhaust, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing it in. Carol's car was a dark blue sedan, and her driver, she had a driver, which I was still processing, got out and opened the door without being asked. She gestured for me to get in first. We drove to a hotel nearby where she was staying, and we sat in the lobby with tea that I didn't really drink, and she told me everything. Her son, my father, had left when I was young, and she had not approved of that either. She and my father had a difficult relationship for years after, but she had watched from a distance, through whatever information she could gather. And when I graduated high school, she had decided she was not going to let another generation of her family's damage fall on me if she could help it. She had set up the education fund through an attorney and sent formal notification to my mother's address, because that was the only address she had for me. She had received a letter back, on what appeared to be my behalf, explaining that I had received the information and preferred no contact with my paternal relatives at this time. She had honored that, she said. She had waited. Every year she had asked her attorney to confirm the funds were being used for education expenses, and every year she received confirmation that the account was active and the balance was being maintained. What she had not known, what her attorney had not caught for years, was that the confirmation was coming from Glenn, who had, at some point, developed a relationship with someone at the account management firm, who had managed the paper trail with enough plausibility that a casual review didn't catch it. When Carol had finally hired a forensic accountant 2 years ago, after my father mentioned in passing that I seemed to be struggling financially, which was the first honest thing he'd apparently said in years, the picture had come together. $96,000. 4 years of my life. The civil suit was filed. The bank had been notified. The account records had been subpoenaed. Her attorney believed the case was strong. I sat with all of that for a long time. "I'm not asking you for anything," Carol said. She had her hands wrapped around her tea, the same way I had mine, which I noticed. "I'm not asking you to forgive anyone. I'm not asking you to have a relationship with me if you don't want one. I came tonight because you deserve to know, from a person, not a legal document." I looked at her. I had spent my entire adult life believing that I was someone no one had thought to invest in, that I was, as Glenn had once phrased it when he thought I wasn't listening, not really his concern. I had built a life out of that belief, careful, economical, never expecting much, because expecting led to the particular kind of hurt that came from being let down by the people who were supposed to matter. Turns out, someone had invested $96,000 worth, and someone else had taken it. "The loans," I said. "We're addressing that," Carol said. "Whatever the civil judgment recovers, the first priority is your loan balance. My attorney is very clear on that." I nodded. We sat in that lobby for almost 2 hours. She told me about my father. Not defending him, just explaining, the way you explain weather, as something that happened with its own internal logic, even if you couldn't always endorse it. She told me about her own life. She had run a small property management company for 30 years. She was widowed. She had a dog named Biscuit who was staying with a neighbor. At some point, I started talking too, about the coffee shop at Ohio State, about the coat with the stuck zipper, about the specific satisfaction of the work I did now, the way it felt to spend 8 hours making someone's difficult day a little more manageable. She listened the way people listen when they're not waiting for their turn to speak. When I finally left, Carol's driver took me home, which I thought I should protest but didn't. I sat in the back of that car and looked out the window at the city going by. The streets I knew. The neighborhoods I'd learned over 4 years of building a life from scratch in a city where I knew no one, because that's what I thought I had to do. I thought about my mother, about what the next months would look like, legally, for her and Glenn. I didn't feel triumphant about it. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was tired and sad, and underneath the sad, so far underneath I almost missed it. Something that was either relief or the beginning of being very, very angry in a way I hadn't let myself be yet. There is a thing that happens when you've been carrying a weight for so long that you stop noticing it. You just arrange your life around it. You take the stairs instead of the elevator. You don't stand up too fast. You learn to sleep on your side so it doesn't press on your chest. You call it your life. You think this is just who you are. Someone had been taking from me for 4 years, and I had thanked them, silently, for teaching me to be self-sufficient. The civil case settled 14 months later. I won't share the exact number, but the loan is gone. Paid in full in a single transfer on a Tuesday morning when I was at work. And I found out by checking my balance on my phone during a break and having to sit down on the floor of the hallway for a moment because my knees did something strange. Glenn entered a payment arrangement. My mother, as far as I know, is still in the house. Our relationship is what it is now, which is to say it is almost nothing, which is different from almost nothing, because I chose it rather than because I failed to build something better. Carol and I have dinner when she's in Cincinnati, which is more often now than it used to be. Her dog Biscuit is large and tan and extremely confident for an animal with that name. The first time I met him, he put his head in my lap and stayed there for an hour, and Carol said that he was a good judge of character, and I thought, yes, apparently. So is she. I still wear the navy dress sometimes. It fits better now. I had the shoulders taken in last spring by a tailor 2 blocks from my apartment who charges reasonable prices and does good work. I don't iron it the night before anymore. I just hang it up, and it's fine. I've thought a lot about what the turning point actually was, not the legal one that came later with paperwork and settlement figures and a Tuesday morning when I checked my loan balance on my phone and had to sit down on a hallway floor. The real turning point was earlier. It was the moment I stopped believing that the story I'd been handed about my own life was the true one. For a long time, I accepted a version of myself that other people had written. The version where no one had thought to invest in me, where I was someone you worked around, not for. Glenn had a phrase for it, self-sufficiency, and I had absorbed it so completely that I wore a broken coat for 6 weeks in an Ohio winter and felt, honestly, a small private pride about it. I was managing, I was resourceful, I didn't need anyone. What I didn't know was that someone had already decided I was worth investing in. Carol had made that decision before I ever set foot on a college campus. She didn't know me well. She was working from a distance, from a complicated family history, from a desire to do something right in the middle of a lot of things that had gone wrong. And she was deceived, systematically, by people who understood that the easiest person to steal from is someone who doesn't know they're being stolen from. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. Not the anger. The anger came naturally, and I think it was appropriate, and I don't regret having felt it. But underneath the anger was something harder to name. It was the recognition that I had been a participant in my own diminishment, not because I was foolish, but because I had been given false information and I had acted on it in good faith. I had built a whole architecture of habits and expectations around a lie, and those habits, the careful grocery lists, the patched coat, the quiet assumption that asking for help was a form of weakness. Those didn't disappear overnight just because the truth had been revealed. Integrity, I've come to think, is not just about what you do when people are watching. It's about what you do with the information you have, and what you do when that information turns out to be wrong. Glenn and my mother made choices in private that they believed would never surface. They were wrong about that, not because justice is guaranteed, but because lies accumulate weight, and weight eventually becomes visible. A forensic accountant, 8 months of careful work, and a grandmother who refused to stop asking questions, that's what accountability looked like in this case. Slow, unglamorous, but real. I think about Iris, about myself at 22, 24, 27, eating peanut butter out of the jar and calling it fine. I want to tell her that the self-reliance she was building was real, even if the circumstances that forced it were built on a theft. The muscles you develop carrying weight are still yours, even after the weight is removed. But I also want to tell her that accepting less than you're owed is not the same as being strong. Knowing the difference, that took me longer. Carol once said to me that she spent 2 years being too respectful of a silence that had been manufactured without her knowledge. I think about that often. The things we don't question because we've been told, implicitly or explicitly, that questioning them is impolite or ungrateful or too much. Sometimes the most intelligent thing you can do is refuse to accept an answer that doesn't add up, not with hostility, but with the quiet, persistent insistence that the numbers should make sense. They should have made sense a long time ago. Now they do.